Okay, you ready for this? I'm about to take you down the rabbit hole I just fell into.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We're talking psychoanalysis,
Mm.
but not the cliche stuff. We're going deep.
Like beyond the couch and all that?
Exactly. Think unconscious, think defense mechanisms.
I mean, that stuff's everywhere once you start noticing it.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like we all speak a little psychoanalysis without even realizing it.
That's a good point.
So to really get into it, we've got this textbook excerpt on psychotherapy, specifically Unit 1.
Ah, getting to the source material.
And guess what? It covers psychoanalysis and like all its little offshoots.
There are a lot of those, right?
Oh, yeah. Get this. 22 different theoretical orientations under the psychoanalysis umbrella.
22.
Yep, 22. Talk about variety.
That's wild. No wonder people get confused.
Right. Like, where do you even start?
Well, I'd say you got to start with the OG,
Freud.
the one and only.
All right. So, Sigmund Freud. Some of his ideas, well, let's just say they've been debated.
To put it mildly.
But he kind of set the stage for everything that came after, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the concept of the unconscious alone. Revolutionary.
Like there's this whole hidden world driving our actions.
Exactly. We're not just these rational beings making conscious choices all the time. There's a lot going on under the surface.
And then there's that whole thing about our basic drives.
Oh, yeah. Eros and Thanatos.
Sex and aggression. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're keeping this PG.
Of course, of course.
But it's interesting how Freud saw these as the core forces behind everything we do.
Like even getting a promotion at work.
Yep, even that.
Interesting way to look at it.
Right. So we've got this unconscious world, these primal urges. How do we even function?
Yeah, that's where Freud's structural model comes in. The id, the ego, and the superego.
The famous trio.
Exactly.
So remind us who's who in this psychic drama.
All right, imagine this. Your id. That's the party animal. Instant gratification, no rules.
Sounds familiar.
Then you've got the superego. Total rule follower. The voice of conscience.
Always trying to keep us in check.
And stuck in the middle.
The ego.
Right. Trying to keep everyone happy. Mediating between desires and reality.
Sounds exhausting.
It can be. But that's life, right? Always negotiating with ourselves.
I guess so. But where does all that unconscious stuff fit into this?
Well, Freud compared the mind to an iceberg.
Oh, I've heard that one.
The conscious mind, that's just the tip, what we see above the water.
Most of it's hidden.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is. And this isn't even getting into those psychosexual stages yet.
Oh, yeah, we can't forget those.
Oral, anal, phallic, those names are enough to make anyone blush.
Freud wasn't exactly known for subtlety.
True, true. But even if some of the specifics are, well, a bit out there,
Sure.
the core idea that our early experiences shape who we are, that's powerful.
Definitely. It's like those early relationships are the foundation we build on for the rest of our lives.
Exactly. So we're shaped by these unconscious forces, these early experiences. But if most of this is hidden, how do we even begin to manage it?
That's where defense mechanisms come in.
Ah, yes, those sneaky little things.
They're not all bad, though.
Really?
Think of them as the ego's way of protecting us from anxiety. Like a shield, sort of.
So it's not just about being in denial, like people say.
Not necessarily. It's more complex than that.
Okay, so what are some of these mechanisms we all use?
Well, there's repression, where we push those unwanted thoughts and feelings down, out of sight, out of mind.
Classic. What else?
Projection, taking those unacceptable parts of ourselves and seeing them in other people.
Ah, so that's why I get so annoyed by that guy at work who's always late.
Maybe.
It's making me look at myself in a whole new light.
That's the point. And we're just getting started. Remember, Freud is just the beginning.
Like there's more?
Oh, yeah. We haven't even touched on object relations theory or self-psychology.
So there are other theories that build on Freud's work.
Definitely. And some that challenge it, too.
This is getting interesting.
It is, isn't it?
I'm already starting to see the world differently.
That's what happens when you start exploring the unconscious.
Right. I'm ready to go deeper.
Let's do it. Okay, so we've talked theory.
We've gone deep on Freud.
The unconscious, defense mechanisms, all that good stuff.
But how does it actually help anyone, like in real life?
That's the key question, right? How do we bridge that gap between theory and practice?
Exactly. Like, it's cool to know about the id and the ego, but does that help me with my fear of public speaking?
Well, that's where the therapy part comes in. Remember, it's not just about uncovering these unconscious patterns. It's about understanding how they're impacting your life right now.
So it's not about blaming my parents for everything.
Not at all. It's not about blame. It's more about recognizing how those early experiences might still be playing out in our present relationships, behaviors.
So like my fear of public speaking.
Exactly. A psychodynamic therapist might explore whether there are any past experiences that could be contributing to that fear.
Okay, let's say there are. Like, maybe I had a really embarrassing moment in school, froze up during a presentation or something.
That's definitely a possibility. Those early experiences of feeling exposed or judged, they can stick with you.
Or maybe like a caregiver who was always super critical.
Could be. If you had someone constantly emphasizing achievement,
Oh,
perfection.
my dad was totally like that. It's like I can still hear his voice in my head sometimes
Yeah.
telling me I'm not good enough.
See, that's a powerful insight. It shows how those early dynamics can really shape our beliefs about ourselves, our abilities.
It's like we create these blueprints based on those early relationships.
And those blueprints can be hard to change.
Totally. So let's say we've uncovered some of these patterns, the stuff fueling my public speaking fear. What then? How does therapy actually help me change them?
That's where the therapeutic relationship is so important. It provides a safe space to explore those emotions, those beliefs.
So it's not just about talking about my problems.
Right. It's about the dynamic between you and the therapist. They use specific techniques to help you gain insight, facilitate change.
Techniques, huh? Give me the scoop.
One of the key ones is interpretation, helping you understand the unconscious meaning behind your thoughts, feelings, behaviors.
So if I'm always complaining about my boss being critical,
The therapist might point out that you're projecting your own self-criticism onto him.
whoa. So I'm seeing my own stuff reflected back at me.
In a way, yes. It's about recognizing those patterns, even the ones we're not aware of.
Sounds intense. Are there like big revelations in every session?
Not always. It can be subtle. The therapist might just clarify your thoughts and feelings at first.
So instead of saying I hate my boss, I might explore why I feel that way, what it says about me.
Exactly, going deeper.
Yeah.
And as you become more aware, the therapist might start to gently confront any inconsistencies or avoidances.
Like how I always change the subject when my mom comes up.
Could be. That's a classic example of resistance. By pointing it out, the therapist helps you understand why you're avoiding those topics, what you might be afraid to face.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's this thing, technical neutrality, right? Doesn't that mean the therapist is just like a blank slate?
It's a common misconception. It doesn't mean they're emotionless. It's about creating a safe, non-judgmental space for you to explore your inner world.
So they're not there to judge me, but to help me understand myself.
Exactly. It doesn't mean they can't be warm and empathetic, but they also need to maintain a certain objectivity.
Okay, that makes sense. More like a compassionate observer than a judge and jury.
Right. And sometimes that might even involve a little self-disclosure on the therapist's part.
Wait, therapists can share stuff about themselves. I thought that was like a big no-no.
It can be tricky, but if it's done carefully and it benefits the client,
How so? Give me an example.
imagine you're struggling with feelings of inadequacy. The therapist might share a time when they felt the same way.
To show I'm not alone.
Exactly. It humanizes them, challenges any idealization you might have.
I like that. So it's not just about me lying on the couch, spilling my guts. It's more of a back and forth.
Definitely. But how do we know any of this actually works?
Right. That's what I'm wondering. Is there proof that psychodynamic therapy is actually effective?
That's a fair question. And the research on therapy is complex. But there's growing evidence that psychodynamic therapy can be helpful for a wide range of issues.
Like what?
Depression, anxiety, personality disorders, trauma, even some physical health conditions like chronic pain.
Wow, really? But how does it stack up against other therapies like CBT?
The CBT versus psychodynamic debate.
Right. Everyone's talking about CBT these days.
They both have their strengths. CBT is great for identifying and changing negative thought patterns, behaviors.
More focus on the here and now, right?
Exactly. Psychodynamic therapy goes deeper, exploring the unconscious roots of those patterns.
So CBT is more about fixing the symptoms. Psychodynamic is about understanding the cause.
You could say that. CBT can provide quick relief, but psychodynamic therapy aims for more lasting change by addressing those deeper emotional issues.
So it's more of a long-term investment.
In a way, yes. And the research suggests the benefits can last even after therapy ends.
Okay, I'm seeing the appeal. But to be clear, what makes psychodynamic therapy so different? What are its key features?
One is its focus on affect, on expressing emotions, all of them, even the uncomfortable ones.
So it's not about suppressing feelings.
No, It's about understanding and managing them in a healthy way.
Even the messy, irrational ones.
Especially those. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human emotion.
That's powerful. What else?
Well, it also explores our attempts to avoid those distressing thoughts and feelings.
Defense mechanisms. We're back to those, huh?
They're a big part of it. Psychodynamic therapy helps you become aware of these mechanisms and how they might be affecting you.
So it's about recognizing those avoidance patterns and finding better ways to cope.
Exactly. And a good therapist will help you do that with compassion and without judgment.
Okay, got it. Anything else that sets it apart?
Another key aspect is the focus on recurring themes and patterns. Psychodynamic therapy helps you see those patterns that keep popping up in your life.
Like in relationships, work.
Everywhere. It's about connecting the dots between past experiences and present challenges.
Seeing how those old blueprints are still influencing us.
Right. And by understanding those patterns, you can start to break free from them.
Create new, healthier ones.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important feature, the emphasis on interpersonal relationships.
Because our relationships are a huge part of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can be both a source of pain and healing.
So it's not just me and my therapist talking about my feelings, it's also about how I relate to others.
Yes. And the therapy relationship itself becomes like a mini version of those broader relationship patterns.
So the way I interact with my therapist?
Can reveal a lot about how you interact with the world in general.
Interesting. It's like a practice ground for better relationships.
Exactly. By working through those patterns in therapy.
You can take those skills out into the real world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This is all pretty mind-blowing stuff, right?
It is. It feels like we've only scratched the surface, though.
You're right. There's so much more to explore. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll look at some of the criticisms of psychoanalytic theory, how it's evolved over time.
Okay, I'm ready for part 3. Bring on the critiques. Okay, so we've journeyed through the depths of the unconscious, explored the world of psychodynamic therapy.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But no exploration is complete without considering the critiques, right?
Of course. Every theory has its limitations. It's important to be critical.
Exactly. So let's get critical. What are some of the main criticisms of psychoanalysis?
Well, one common one is that it's too focused on the past, especially childhood.
Like blaming your parents for everything.
That's a bit of an oversimplification, but critics argue that dwelling on the past can be unproductive.
Makes sense. You can't change what's already happened.
Right. While acknowledging the impact of the past is important, the goal is to understand how it's affecting you now.
So it's not about getting stuck in the past, but using it to inform the present.
Exactly. And a good therapist will guide you in that process.
Okay, what other criticisms are out there?
Another one is that it's too subjective, hard to test scientifically.
Yeah. We're dealing with the unconscious mind here. Not exactly easy to measure.
Right. Some of the concepts are a bit vague, open to interpretation.
So it's not as clear-cut as, say, CBT.
Not in the same way. And while there's growing research on psychodynamic therapy, it's not always easy to design rigorous studies.
Because you're dealing with stuff that's, well, hidden.
Exactly. It's a different kind of exploration.
More of an art than a science, maybe.
Perhaps a blend of both. And some actually see that subjectivity as a strength.
Wait, really? How so?
Because it allows for a more individualized approach. Every person is unique. Every story is different.
So it's not about fitting everyone into the same box.
No. Psychoanalysis recognizes the complexity of the human experience. It honors that.
Okay, I'm seeing the appeal. But has psychoanalysis evolved at all in response to these criticisms?
Oh, absolutely. It's been constantly evolving. There are newer schools of thought that have adapted and addressed some of these concerns.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, there's been a shift away from the more traditional Freudian approach toward a more relational, intersubjective perspective.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that mean?
It's a move away from the idea of the therapist as this all-knowing expert, you know?
Like the silent observer taking notes while you spill your secrets.
Exactly. Newer approaches see the therapeutic relationship as more collaborative.
More of a two-way street.
Right. Both the therapist and the client bring their experiences to the table. It's a partnership.
I like that. Feels more balanced, more empowering for the client.
Definitely. And this shift has also led to a greater emphasis on the here and now.
So, less digging into childhood, more about how those experiences are showing up in your life today.
Exactly. And it also allows for a more nuanced understanding of how culture and society impact us.
So, a more holistic view.
Precisely.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about psychoanalysis.
It's a fascinating field, isn't it? Always evolving.
It is. So, What's next for psychoanalysis? Where do we go from here?
I think the key is integration, combining psychodynamic therapy with other approaches.
Like what?
Neuroscience, attachment theory, mindfulness, taking the best of different worlds to create something even richer.
That makes sense. A more holistic approach to mental well-being.
Exactly.
Well, this has been quite a journey. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into psychoanalysis, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
Remember that psychoanalysis is about recognizing the complexity of being human. It's about honoring the unconscious, understanding its power. And it's about embracing that journey of self-discovery.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep. And as Freud said, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways.
Wise words to live by.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring.